Welcome back, everyone. Today we're diving into the heavy-duty machinery of the human body, bone formation. I'm Dr. Khan, and I'm joined by the walking medical encyclopedia, Dr. Sarah. Sarah, I was looking at a newborn's x-ray this morning, and it's just wild how different their skeleton looks compared to an adult. It's like they're made of two completely different materials.
That's because, in many ways, they are. It all comes down to the two primary developmental pathways, intramembranous and endochondral ossification. If you're prepping for your boards, you absolutely have to know the difference between bone from a membrane and bone from a cartilage model. It's High Yield 101.
I love that. To me, it's like two different ways to build a house. Intramembranous is like pouring a concrete slab directly on the ground. Boom, you have a floor. Endochondral is more like building a detailed wooden frame first and then slowly replacing each piece of wood with brick. One is fast and direct, the other is a long, multi-step renovation.
Exactly. Let's start with the concrete slab, intramembranous ossification. This is where bone develops directly from a connective tissue membrane, specifically from mesenchymal cells that differentiate into osteoblasts. There is no middleman here, no cartilage. For the exam, remember this happens primarily in the flat bones of the skull vault, like the frontal and parietal bones and the clavicle.
And why does this matter clinically? Think about the miracle of childbirth. Because these skull bones form within a membrane, they aren't fully fused at birth. We have those soft spots, the fontanelles. If the skull was a solid endochondral block of bone from day one, it couldn't mold or overlap during its descent through the birth canal. That flexibility is literally a lifesaver.
That's a great clinical tie-in. On the academic side, though, don't forget that even though they are flat bones, they have a specific sandwich-like structure. Two tables of compact bone with a layer of cancellous bone called the diplo in the middle. If a question asks about the vault of the skull, think intramembranous.
Now, let's talk about the wooden frame method, endochondral ossification. This is how most of our skeleton forms, especially the long bones like the femur and humerus. You start with a hyaline cartilage model. It's flexible, it's tiny, and then over years, it's systematically replaced by bone.
The timeline here is crucial for the boards. Endochondral ossification is a slow burn. It starts in utero but isn't finished until you're 18 to 20 years old. You need to know the landmarks. The diaphysis is the primary ossification center in the shaft, and the epiphyses are the secondary centers at the ends. Between them lies the holy grail of pediatric orthopedics, the epiphyseal plate.
Ah, the growth plate. Why does this matter clinically? Because that plate is made of hyaline cartilage, it's the weak link in a child's skeleton. A kid falls off the monkey bars, and instead of a ligament tear, they might actually fracture or slip that epiphyseal plate. If that cartilage is damaged and scars over into bone too early, that limb stops growing. One leg could end up shorter than the other.
Right, and that's why any trauma to a joint in a growing child needs a careful eye. Clinically, you also see issues like rickets, where there's defective mineralization of that cartilage matrix. The epiphyseal plates actually widen because the cartilage keeps growing but doesn't turn into hard bone. That's why you get the classic bowing of the legs under the child's weight. It's a structural failure. The wooden frame is too soft to hold the weight. Now, Sarah, help me out with the terminology for the exam. Students always get tripped up on the metaphysis. Think of the metaphysis as the transition zone. It's the part of the diaphysis that abuts the epiphyseal plate. It's incredibly vascular, which makes it a common site for osteomyelitis, bone infections in children. If you see a question about a kid with a fever and pain near the end of a long bone, the metaphysis is usually the culprit.
That's a high-yield pearl right there. You know, I always tell my residents that when they are looking at an MRI and trying to decide on a diagnosis, they need to be the doctor of choice who understands the underlying embryology. If you know how the bone was built, you know how it's going to break or get infected.
I love that. Let's recap the major differences for everyone. Intramembranous is direct, involves flat bones like the skull vault, and allows for birth molding. Endochondral is indirect, uses a hyaline cartilage model, involves long bones, and is responsible for our height via the epiphyseal plates.
And remember, endochondral bone is a living, breathing tissue with a massive blood supply. The periosteum, that fibrous sleeve around the bone, is loaded with nerves. That's why a fracture hurts so much. It's not just the bone breaking, it's the tension and bleeding under that sensitive periosteal sleeve.
And the repair process actually mimics the development. When a bone fractures, the body often creates a fibrocartilaginous callus first, similar to the endochondral model, before replacing it with hard bone. The body goes back to its developmental roots to heal itself.
Nature is efficient. So why does all this matter clinically one last time? Because whether you are looking at a neonatal skull molding or a teenager with a growth plate injury, the mechanism of how that bone was formed dictates the pathology you're treating today.
Perfectly said. If you can distinguish the membrane-based flat bones from the cartilage-based long bones, you've mastered a huge chunk of musculoskeletal development.
Thanks for the deep dive, Sarah. Remember, folks, intramembranous for the head, endochondral for the bed, as in the long bones that support you while you stand. We'll see you next time.